Om Sahana Vavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu Ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. So, on the third Saturday of every month, we will be taking the same class. Instead of 7 o'clock, we will be slowly be shifting to a different time. The third Saturday, it will be 5 o'clock because the class is being held at Bharatiya Vidya Bhavan, so that those who like to attend the class face to face can come here. Of course, it is accessible by tube. West Kensington is very near, just a 3-minute walk. And the class which we normally take on Saturdays, alternately it's Bhagavad Gita on one Saturday. The next Saturday is Vedanta and the Science of Human Possibilities. That is the topic we normally discuss. So we will continue with the same topic, whether it is held at Bhavan or some Saturdays it might be held either at the center, Vedanta Center, or sometimes if I happen to be in Newcastle or Edinburgh, the class will be conducted, but we'll try not to miss any of these classes. Of course, every alternate Saturday, the Bhagavad Gita class will be at 5:45. They don't change the time. There is no summer time or no winter time. So the Bhagavad Gita class will always be 5:45. Here, today it is at 5 o'clock. We are trying to just see if we can change the time. But as of now, it is 5 o'clock. We are a bit late because we had to set up the YouTube live and the Zoom session here. It's a new place. We are beginning this class in West Kensington after a long gap of about 2.5 years. Because of COVID, we could not come here. Now, people who are willing to attend the class live face-to-face can come and attend it here. So now we were discussing the growing awareness of the spiritual self. There are various human possibilities which every human being tries to explore. Man is full of possibilities. The only thing is, he doesn't explore all his human possibilities. He explores some of them and he thinks that he has achieved a lot in that particular field. But there are many fields which he is yet to explore because of ignorance. That is what Vedanta says. There's no harm in developing the physical body, the mind, the intellectual sheath, or we have the mental sheath, Manomaya Kosha. All these different levels of our personalities have to be developed, no doubt. But one should not stop. One has to progressively develop the higher aspects of his or her own personality. That is what spiritual life is all about. It does not say that the physical is wrong, but one should not get stuck at the physical level. Physical strength, physical development, mental strength, mental development. Then we have many other possibilities. So what happens when one develops a growing awareness? We saw so many examples from the Upanishads that when you develop the spiritual possibilities, what happens? After examining whatever is there in the physical world, in the mental world, intellectual capacities, when everything is developed, after several births, a human being has some kind of inner dissatisfaction. It is known as some kind of existential problems continuously trouble him. He is happy, he has wealth, he has good health, he has almost everything that a human being can aspire for in this world, to live very comfortably in this world. Yet there is some kind of emptiness. With all the wealth, with all the capacities he has developed, and he has worked hard for it. He deserves to have those things because he has worked. It's not just by chance. If you see Charles Darwin's theory of evolution, how much of struggle an amoeba has to undergo, passes through various bodies, gives up the body because it thinks, and takes up higher bodies because it feels that it can express itself better as animals, then as human beings, and then as noble human beings. The higher faculties are developed. Still, the human soul is not satisfied. It seeks something still higher. And till then, there is no peace for human beings. Till he attains the highest spirituality, the highest, or he identifies himself with the spiritual self, he will, like the bird example which we saw, there was a bird which was eating both sweet and bitter fruits from a tree. And it was just now and then watching the bird which was perched on the top. It was neither eating the bitter fruit nor eating the sweet fruits. It was just majestic in its appearance, full of peace. So this bird gets tempted, wants to imitate that bird which is perched on the highest branch. And it says, what have I been doing all this while? I am just going after these bitter fruits and the sweet fruits. Now and then I come across a sweet fruit, and then I think the fruits will always be sweet. Then again there is these bitter fruits come, and then I feel disgusted. So this never-ending transmigration. A human being transmigrates. Even in the human body, he takes up newer bodies. Every time he is born, he finds there is some deficiency which he tries to rectify in his next birth, so that his spiritual possibilities are manifested more. He tries to manifest, but somehow the physical body, the desires, the mental states, they pull him down. He has good intentions. As the famous English proverb goes, the way to hell is paved with good intentions. If good intentions themselves are not enough, one has to struggle to make those intentions realities. So that struggle, as Jesus said, the spirit may be strong, but the flesh is weak. So the flesh, and the flesh, by flesh he means the gross world. So the world drags us down. That is how it gravitates towards the gross world. But the spirit has to establish or struggle against. One has to, at great cost, your health may suffer, as they say. It requires, Bhagavan Buddha also said, in the beginning when he was struggling, he felt that it was too heavy. I mean, too much of strain. He did a lot of tapasya. He almost reduced himself to skin and bones, thinking that that way he might realize the spirit. But then he found that too much of austerity is not good. He gave the example of a wired instrument. The wire, if it is very tight, the sound is not, the music is not good. If it is too loose, then the music is not good. It should be optimum. So one has to follow the middle path. Even the Gita says one has to follow the middle path. But then when we follow the middle path, what happens is, unfortunately, the progress is slow. You see, when Sri Ramakrishna did his spiritual practices, we know how his health suffered. For months together, for several months, he found that the body could not stand the strain of the spiritual practices. So Bhagavan Buddha preached the middle path. He said, just as a stringed instrument, if it is tight, there is no music is produced. If it is too loose, music is not produced. So it has to be the right tension has to be there in the string. So also he said it is better to follow the middle path. But in the evolutionary process of a human being, when we follow the middle path, the time taken is rather slow. There are some exceptional sadhakas or aspirants, spiritual aspirants, who don't care for the body. They're intense, their struggle is intense. Maybe they don't live long, but they attain realization very quickly, as we see in the case of Swami Vivekananda also. He lived for hardly 39 years, but what he achieved in 39 years, perhaps a person would not have achieved in 1 century. So it's not the length of life that is important, it's the quality that is important. So this growing awareness, as I said, when the physical possibilities are explored and we reach the culmination of the physical strength that we develop, we reach the limits of physical strength. And that is as far as the physical growth is concerned. We'll reach the limits of intellectual strength or intellectual capacities. Even then, there is some kind of sense of lack of fulfillment. And the human being will not be satisfied till all the possibilities as a human being are explored and fulfilled. So when that awareness, we discussed it last time, the awareness that the spiritual self, as a person recognizes that his spiritual self all along has been pure, free and immortal. But at the same time, he is identifying himself with a mortal body which is subject to disease, a mind which is subject to depression, joy. Sometimes it is full of joy, sometimes it is full of sadness. So misery and other things, this fluctuating the fluctuating part of his life, he feels that no matter how much I try, the other possibilities at the lower levels do not give rise to peace and fulfillment. So he tries to transcend them. That is what the Upanishad says. So he recognizes that not only is his own nature, if he identifies himself with the spirit, the spiritual self, which is the highest possibility human being can reach. When he reaches that state, the Upanishad says, he also sees that same divinity, that same spiritual self in others. And that is why he feels some kind of kinship with other people. That is how true universality is attained. Not by just saying that all are equal. It's just a verbal, we verbally we may say that we are all equal, but we may not feel it or we may not realize it. But for a man of realization, when he realizes that he is one with the pure immortal spirit, he sees the same deathless spirit. He doesn't consider the human beings and the other objects around him, which he encounters on a daily basis. He doesn't consider them to be in any way inferior to himself. He thinks they are the same ocean is behind all the waves. As Swami Vivekananda explains in his Jnana Yoga, I may be a small wave, another wave may be much bigger than me, but behind us is the same ocean. We are made of the same substance. That pure consciousness, when one attains, when at the spiritual, there is no equality. Let me repeat. Many people think that God has created all men equal. Once somebody in the gospel said, why should you go to see great people? Sri Ramakrishna always liked to visit great people, great artists. Somehow he felt, as the Bhagavad Gita also says in the Vibhuti Yoga, wherever there is some kind of greatness, the manifestation of God or Ishvara is more in that person. So at the gross level, we'll see this discrepancy. There are good people, there are strong people, there are powerful people. We can't say that we are equal, though the communists would like to have a society which is totally equal, but it is just a empty dream. Society can never be equal. Even the fingers, 5 fingers are of different sizes, they have different functions. So unity, you have to see the unity in diversity. Diversity is the very nature of Prakriti. When you try to see that equality in the gross universe that you see in people around you, you'll not find that unity. You'll think that this person is being too much idealistic. How can he say, when he clearly sees one person is more talented, another person is greater than the other person? That kind of difference we can easily see, but that is only at the gross level. As we identify ourselves with our higher self, then you see that at that level, at the level of pure consciousness, we are all equal. At the level of the spirit, I and my Father are one. That is what Jesus said. We are one. I am one as spirit. Otherwise, the Father and Son will, at the grosser level or the lower level, they will always be eternally separate. And Father will be Father and Son will be the Son. But when Jesus said, I and my Father are one, he spoke from the highest level. Just as in the second chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, we'll find that Sri Krishna, Arjuna, is being told by Sri Krishna to see that same self. When you see the person in front of you, when you see him as spirit, you see him manifesting the highest possibility. When you manifest that highest possibility within yourself as spirit, when you understand yourself as, identify yourself with that pure eternal spirit, the Upanishad says you deal with your fellow beings with a lot of respect, regard. It's something genuinely, you have a genuine respect. It's not just an external show of respect. Here you really see that divinity shining. When Sri Ramakrishna, one day he saw a vision where he says, I saw that the same cotton was there and I found different human beings. It's a very figurative way of explaining. He says, I saw them as pillows. Some were small pillows, some were big pillows, but I could clearly see it is the same cotton that is being stuffed inside each of them. And he was seeing the cotton and he saw that at that level all are equal. All are made of the same material, that is cotton. The shapes and sizes may vary. So his self-interest for such a person, when he attains the realization, when he attains his identity, or maybe he realizes his identity with the spirit, he will invariably see the same spirit in others. And that is how true love rises in a person. His self-interest becomes harmonized with the other self-interest. He cannot be selfish because he sees the same self in other beings. And that is why he becomes compassionate. When Buddha wanted to sacrifice his life for saving the life of a goat, it was because he was seeing that goat, that consciousness behind the goat and the consciousness behind his own self, the same. So he was literally feeling it. In Sri Ramakrishna's case also we saw, he sometimes used to reach such a high state, and when he reached that state, he could not even tolerate if people were trampling upon the fresh grass. He used to scold them. He said, what are you doing? I feel as if somebody is walking on my chest. He really felt that pain. But that was not always. When his mind rose to those levels, there's another famous incident when there was a big earthquake somewhere. And it seems Swami Vivekananda was meditating and his Guru Bhai, Swami Vijnananda, was staying in another room. So he heard that some weeping sound. Swamiji was weeping. crying. Then he thought, what has happened to Swamiji? And it was almost midnight. So he just peeped through the door. Swamiji always used to keep his door open. They were staying next to each other. And he found that Swamiji, there were tears flowing in his eyes and he was weeping as if he is witnessing something. And when he went and asked him, what is the matter? Why are you crying at this unearthly hour? At night, he was, crying loudly. So then he said, see, I don't know. I suddenly woke up and I heard the cries of lots of people. Something has happened somewhere. His mind was attuned to the cosmic consciousness, the cosmic mind, and the wails and the cries of people who were being crushed by that earthquake far off. In the next day, when they saw the newspapers, a few days later, in those days, news traveled rather slowly. So after a few days, they found that exactly at that same time, there was a big earthquake. So these are not figments of imagination. Swamiji could feel, maybe at that state, at that moment, when he really felt the pangs of pain which others were feeling, perhaps he had raised his mind to the level of the spirit. And that is why he could feel the pain of other people. And that is why he was weeping, unable to bear, as if he is himself suffering in that earthquake. So the ethics which are based on the realization of the spirit, there are people who are ethical because they believe in certain scriptures, they believe in certain dogma, and their religion says you should do this, you should not do this, do's and don'ts. People who blindly follow these do's and don'ts, they can be moral. In fact, many of them practice that kind of morality. There's nothing wrong in that. It's better than becoming a brute and behaving selfishly. But that belief in the moral values, just because this scripture says that, it is not long lasting. They may be moral, but when their interests, when they are under a lot of pressure, they may succumb to, they may do immoral acts also for mere survival. Whereas a person who really sees, who has realized his oneness with the whole universe, having attained that realization which the Upanishads speak of, his ethical life, the moral life which is seen outside, becomes an expression of his realization of his inner consciousness. So his inner consciousness, which he sees in other human beings also, he feels that the same consciousness is shining in other people. How can I hurt him? So that is a surer way of practicing ethical life. He will not make mistakes. He will not succumb to pressure. He may be subject to a lot of temptations, but he will not succumb to it because his ethics is based on the firm realization that he is the spirit. So such a person can never take a false step. Sri Ramakrishna used to give an example. He used to say an expert dancer, when novices take to dancing, they'll make lot of mistakes. But an expert dancer will never have a false step. He can never be induced to take false steps or have these false steps. So this essential unity with the Supreme Self, how does that happen? So here the Upanishads say that when he realizes his essential unity with the Supreme Self, he is released from the prison house of the psychophysical self. Now, it is very difficult to understand how can one be released. For most of us, it is our psychophysical self, that is physical self we understand, the Annamaya Kosha, the body, and the mental self, which motivates us to do things good or bad. They are dictating. We think we are free, but we are under the control of not only the body, but also the mind. So it is, the Upanishad calls it the psychophysical self. So the psychophysical self becomes like the human soul is imprisoned within this psychophysical self. So how to get released from this? There is this concept of Kundalini. Now, as we have discussed many times before, that there are this an Annamaya Kosha, or the body, is animated by prana, the Pranamaya Kosha. There are many forces that makes the body move, including the nervous energy. Nervous energy is also one kind of prana. It is known as Vyana. Then we have Udana, the temperature which is maintained in the body, that is the result of Udana. Similarly, we have prana, the breathing that takes place, the heart that beats, the circulation. All these things are necessary for a person to survive. So this is known as psychophysical self. The physical self alone cannot function without this prana. So the psyche, or which is of course controlled by the mind, the prana is directly or indirectly controlled by this mind. So the nervous energy which forces the heart to pump, which forces the lungs to pump air, because of which we are alive. Otherwise, what is the difference between a dead body? It's only this prana which makes a huge difference. So what motivates the prana? The Upanishad goes deeper. Then they find this fine nervous energy which is passing through the spinal cord, both the sympathetic and the autonomous nervous system. The autonomous nervous system works even in sleep. For example, we don't have to think to breathe. The breathing takes place. Once the child is born, the heart starts beating till the child dies, the man dies. The heart continuously, nobody has to tell the heart. You don't consciously tell the heart to beat. It goes on beating. But still, it is some kind of nervous energy which is the prime force behind our body, the bodily movements. So we are alive only because of this prana. So also, there is a sympathetic nervous system where we respond to external dangers. The nervous system tells us when there is fire, you run away from that. Your survival instinct will tell you that. Who tells you that? It is the nervous system. So whether it is autonomous or sympathetic, the nervous system is is responsible for all our bodily functions. So that is why we call this system is known as psychophysical. Physical, no doubt, but it is connected to the psyche, the nervous energy, which is in turn controlled by our mind, by our sense organs. So that psychophysical system is common to us and also the animals. But in a human being, the yogis found that this energy is flowing through the spinal cord, through two efferent and efferent nerves, which form the shape of 8. If you take a cross section of the spinal cord within the spine, you will find the nervous energy is constantly flowing from head to the base of the spine. So the yogis found that as long as it flows through the efferent Ida and Pingala, the efferent and the efferent nerves within the spine, you will be imprisoned by your body and prana. You will always subject. The body will decide your fate, the body and the prana. So when the prana is is flowing smoothly, you find that you are very healthy, you are in a very good mood. Any disturbance in the prana is nothing but disease. Disease is nothing but some disturbance. Either the body does not function properly, the organs are defective, or even if the organs are perfect, the heartbeat and the pranas which are responsible for our various bodily functions, they are disturbed. Now, how are they disturbed? It is the nervous energy which gets blocked in the spinal columns or you may call Ida and Pingala, that is the name they give. But they say, the yogis discovered that one need not always depend on the nervous energy and allow it to flow through these two nerves, the spinal nerves or the spinal cords as they are known. Then how will the psychic energy flow? We all know that the subtle energies or the mind, which is nothing but a kind of energy more subtle than the nervous energy. We know the gradation right from the beginning we have discussed that Annamaya Kosha, then we come to the Pranamaya Kosha, which is a finer form of its material energy, but it is finer. Energy is always finer than matter. Then we go to the mental energy, the Manomaya Kosha, which is the reactive mind, which gives rise, the mind has a huge impact. If you are always having anxiety, fear, worries, it affects the prana. No matter how much we try, it's not just the autonomous nervous system. You can't have your blood pressure starts rising. Many of the defects are not purely physical. They are known as psychosomatic. Why do we call it psychosomatic? Because the mind plays an important function in the flow of this prana. So the prana flow when it gets disturbed, it in turn disturbs the body. Similarly, the changes in the body disturb the prana and disturbs the mind, vice versa. It works both ways. So what solution do the yogis suggest? They discovered, maybe I don't know, maybe it was a sudden discovery like all the inventions which scientists made. They discovered that there is a hollow between the two nerves. And they found through their own experience when they were meditating that this nervous energy need not flow through the spinal cords. As long as it flows through the solid spinal cords, the efferent and efferent nerves, the body will be subject to a lot of pain and a lot of diseases and many things. And the other way around, because we are imprisoned, as the Upanishad says, we are imprisoned by our own psychophysical system. Not just the physical system, but also the mental system, which the mind, the untrained mind, which goes into fits of depression or fits of joy, and that creates an imbalance in the prana. So how to control this nervous energy, or how to make this nervous energy not impact the body? It is a fine form of energy. Right now it is passing through the nervous or the spinal cord. They said there is a hollow between the two. When the two spinal cords are joined together, in between there is a small hollow. Maybe the physiologically, if you ask a doctor, perhaps he will say it's just for the cerebrospinal fluid which passes through, which gives some kind of protection to the spine so that it does not break. That's not the only function. That hollow has a huge, it has a very, very big function according to the yogis. They say somehow if you, by the practice of sadhana or upasana, by controlling the mind and controlling the prana with the help of the mind, because every thought that you think impacts the prana. So you control that nervous energy, and somehow using the yogic techniques, that is the main idea behind the Kundalini. The idea of Kundalini is to make this nervous energy pass through the hollow. So what happens if it passes through the hollow? An example, Swamiji himself has given this example in the Raj Yoga. It is just like the difference between electric current flowing through wire or wireless. All of us know, if we were depending, there was a time when all the signals went through some wire, and if the wire is broken, the signal did not pass through. But when they discovered the wireless, they found it has a huge, tremendous capacity to not only go long distances, but travel all around the earth. That is how these signals are so powerful, because they are wireless. They don't need a medium to a solid medium to, uh, to be transmitted. So the yogis said, if somehow by practice of yoga, Patanjali's yoga, Patanjali's yoga normally doesn't mention this word Kundalini. They don't directly mention it. It has come from the Tantric philosophy, which for the first time gives a word to this. The nervous energy which passes through the hollow of the spine, it is known as Sushumna. Sushumna Nadi. Actually, it is a hollow. It is not a solid nerve. It is the hollow between two parallel nerves which are attached to each other. It's a very tiny hole. And they've a tiny pipe-like structure. Of course, there is some cerebrospinal fluid, but when the nervous current passes through this hollow, then something tremendous happens. Then you are released from, you are not imprisoned. You are not imprisoned by your psychophysical system. You somehow escape. That is when the Kundalini rises, they say, when it rises up the spine, when all the nervous currents are made to forcibly pass through the hollow, then you somehow get disconnected from the psychophysical complex. And that is how you get freedom. That is true freedom. Now, whether you do it through bhakti, through jnana, through Raj Yoga, or through Karma Yoga, there are different yogas. Don't think it's only through meditation one can reach this state. The awakening of the Kundalini, the Tantras say, Tantra is a philosophy where there are two realities. One is Prakriti or Shakti, and the other is pure consciousness or Shiva. So, the more you free yourself on your dependence on the psychophysical system, the Upanishad says, developing your human possibilities means, first of all, going a level higher than the physical, developing our intellectual koshas, the mind, becoming more and more subtle in our approach to life, not being just gross like the animals. The animals have no scope because they don't have that kind of spine, they don't have that kind of vivek or discrimination to distinguish between the spirit and matter. They are totally imprisoned by their body and their senses. So it is just something like the stimulus response, which the lot of dogs were experiments made. Pavlov was a scientist, Russian scientist, who tried to compare the stimulus and response which the dogs exhibit and try to compare it with human beings. Then what is the difference between human beings and dogs? We no doubt at a gross level we behave like dogs. We may also behave like tigers and all the animals, but that is not the greatness. The real possibility of a human being is not his physical possibility, not his mental possibility, but the possibility to make the nervous current, which has a technical word known as Kundalini, to pass through the hollow of the spine. Now this happens, according to Tantra, by the grace of Prakriti herself. Now Prakriti, in Sankhya philosophy, there are two realities. A changing reality known as Prakriti, a changeless reality behind the changing is Purusha. But the same thing in Tantras is expressed as Shiva and Shakti. So whenever you see changes, whenever you see good, bad, evil, fights, and anything gross, it is the manifestation of Shakti. So Shakti has a power to degenerate a man, make him worse than animals, but that same Shakti enables you to, through the power of Kundalini, to make that human being very noble and attain to this kind of spiritual realization. So Shakti works both ways. Mahamaya or Shakti, Sri Ramakrishna in his very simple language is to say, one is Vidya Maya, another is Avidya Maya. Avidya Maya is that which takes you more and more towards the gross, which makes you more and more imprisoned into the inside the psychophysical dimension of human personality. We feel helpless. We think our body is not supporting us. We think our minds are not supporting us. We find weakness all the time. That is why when Swami Vivekananda was asked, what is the message of the Upanishads, especially for people in India? He said, 1/3 of your problems is not because you are not spiritual, it's because you are physically weak. So, because at three levels, the Sthula, Sukshma and the Karana, we tend to neglect. That is why he advised younger people who wanted to develop this. They said, first go in a graded way. First make the physical part, the physical weakness is one of the reasons for it's the reason why which causes 1/3 of your problems. Most of our problems are purely physical because they have physical causes because that impacts the mind. 1/3 you can say problems are because of the wrong thinking and the wrong application, the lack of control of the mind. So they are purely at the mental or intellectual level. These are problems, anxiety, worry. They are not a very, very healthy, very ignorant person can be free from anxiety because he doesn't have that kind of worry. He lives a peaceful life, he is happy. So he doesn't have so many mental problems. But a person who is highly sophisticated, because he tries to go deeper and deeper into, he doesn't take things at face value. He will go deeper and create problems for himself and for others because of too much of thinking and intellect. So at the intellectual level, 1/3 of the problems, according to Swamiji, he said, is because of the wrong use of your mind. 1/3 is because of the wrong use of the body. And finally, 1/3 you can say is because we did not identify ourselves with the spirit, which is the goal of all religions, the goal of all spiritual practices, and the goal which every person who's trying to explore all the human possibilities. That is why we call this particular subject as Vedanta and the science of human possibility, just a pure science. We are just exploring, we're not stopping our exploration at the physical and mental level. So that people think when we reach the limits of our physical development or the mental development, they think it is success. But true success is when they have control over the psychophysical vehicle. So that is when the higher possibilities start manifesting. What are these higher possibilities? That person learns how to adjust with his neighbors. As Jesus said, love thy neighbor as thyself. How is it possible? Many people ask that question. Even if the neighbor is bad, should I love him? When he says, love thy neighbor as thyself, he's talking of the higher consciousness behind the jiva which we are encountering. So from the spiritual standpoint, that is why he could say when the people who crucified him, he said, "Oh Father, forgive them for they know not what they are doing." He refused to criticize them. Of course, that is not possible for most of us because we have not identified ourselves 100% with the spirit. If that were to be the case, then in that possibility, when it is explored and attained, which most of these prophets do, then you don't see any distinction because at the level of the spirit, I and my Father are one. That's how we understand the Bible. That's how Pragnanam Brahma Aham Brahmasmi. When that's just as saying the Upanishadic saying Aham Brahmasmi, I am Brahman. How can I myself be Brahman? Definitely this body is not Brahman. This body is so weak, it is subject to misery, it is subject to so many problems. How can it be Brahman? How can it be the supreme consciousness? So when that I, the psychophysical imprisonment, if that is removed, when the soul becomes free, then Aham Brahmasmi becomes a reality. So Jesus says, love, thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself in Matthew 22:39 and Mark 12:31. So there also this expresses the universal love, the basis of universal love. Otherwise they are empty words. We say we love animals, we love this, we love that, but it's mostly a selfish kind of love. Whereas true universal love, according to the Upanishads, is the realization of the oneness of the individual self with the cosmic self. So, Ishopanishad, there is a beautiful verse, which is the 6th verse. Yastu sarvani bhutani atmanneva anupashyati sarva bhuteshu chatmanam tato na vijigupsate. Yatu means he who sees all beings in the very self and his own self in all the other beings. He is not averse, he does not hate anybody. Why? Because of that deep experience. It's not just a verbal utterance. The Rishi of this, who expressed these thoughts in the Ishopanishad, which is part of the Vedas, he really experienced that oneness, because he sees all the beings as manifestations of the same self, as different waves of the same ocean. Behind, he sees the ocean, not the waves. If you look at the waves, if you look at the form, name and form, which is temporary, no wave will remain big enough. A huge wave also has to collapse and get merged in the water. So also a tiny wave. So the person who realizes that he is the ocean, he does not bother if there is a big wave or a small wave. So he is averse to none. He does not distinguish, because that distinction, that discrimination is at the lower level only. At the level of Prakriti, we keep quarreling. We say we are great. Our inflated egos, sometimes we think we are great. Somebody else is less great because of the differences we see in Prakriti. But as Purusha, as the self, there is no difference. So, in the Gita also, in the 13th chapter, which we are yet to discuss, we have just come to the 10th chapter. 13th chapter, 28 and 29 verse says, Samam sarveshu bhuteshu tishtantam parameshwaram vinashatsvi avinashyantam ya pashyati sa pashyati. He really sees. Sees means he experiences the truth, who sees the same Supreme Lord equally existent in all beings, and he sees the imperishable in the midst of the perishable. Now that is real strength. There is a beautiful poem, where if you see that, I forgot the name of the Rudyard Kipling. So he wrote a beautiful poem, though it is a very, he wrote that based on his experience of how great men handle tough situations. He says, if everybody around you are losing their heads and blaming it on you, still you don't lose your head and maintain your steadiness, then you are a man. There are many other things, conditions. Who is a true man? So here, the same thing Bhagavad Gita also says, since he sees the same, he who sees the Supreme Lord equally existent in all beings, sees the imperishable in the midst of the perishable. So the Rudyard Kipling, he was trying to think of an ideal man who would not be a slave of the circumstances around him. When everybody is losing their temper, losing their heads over petty things, this man, this Sthita Prajna man, stands firm. He is not disturbed by the changing Prakriti. So to assert the Purusha, when the Prakriti around you, and of course, where do you get the strength? According to the Tantras, it is the same Shakti, which is also known as Maya in Vedanta, which is responsible for your downfall, is the same power. If it is used positively, it can release you from bondage. So, Avidya Maya and Vidya Maya. Vidya Maya means that power of Prakriti which takes you towards the Purusha, which makes you see the imperishable. When you see things perishing around you, your hard-earned money, your very dear relatives, the people around you, people and things that you thought were permanent, but you get rude shocks when these things vanish from our sight. And when they go, we feel sad, because that is the very nature of Prakriti. But that very same Prakriti gives you the Viveka, which is known as discrimination between the real and the unreal, between the imperishable and the perishable. So, one who sees the same Lord, the Lord whom he is worshipping, the same Spirit existing in all, and he sees the imperishable in the midst of the perishable. Then Bhagavad also says, Mam eva sarva bhuteshu bahirantar apavrutam ikshati atmani cha atmanam yatha kham amalashaya. With a pure mind, what do you mean by a pure mind? A mind which is in which the thoughts are not bubbling up all the time. The idea of purity is if a person has controlled thoughts, thoughts just don't bubble up randomly. If thoughts bubble up randomly, then mind is not pure, it is impure. So, with a pure mind means a concentrated mind, a mind where the self decides, the Jivatma decides what are the thoughts that I should think. Thoughts just don't randomly bubble up in the mind. That is what is known as the pure mind. In an impure mind, thoughts keep on changing. So with a pure mind, one should observe in all beings as well as in oneself only me, the Atman, who am both inside and outside and all pervasive like space. So, similarly, Uddhava in the Bhagavata, Sri Krishna had many disciples. Arjuna was one of them. And in the Bhagavad Gita, he teaches him Karma Yoga because he knew at this moment Arjuna is fit to practice Karma Yoga. Whereas his other disciple, Uddhava, when Arjuna wanted to leave the battlefield and take to sannyasa, he said, no, this is not your cup of tea. You have to fight. You have to gradually come to that state. Whereas when Uddhava wanted to Uddhava, who's his other disciple, he says, no, you go to the Himalayas. Two disciples, two different advices. So, O Uddhava, Sri Krishna is telling him in the Bhagavata, he is considered to be a sage who takes his stand on pure knowledge, thus regards and honors all beings as myself. Myself means the Lord himself. And has the same attitude towards a scavenger as to a Brahmana, towards a thief as to a supporter of Brahmanas, towards a spark of fire as towards the sun, towards a ruffian as to a kind man. So he doesn't see, because he sees the self-same Lord, which he sees within himself. The problem is that we cannot see the Lord in others till we see that Lord deep within our own hearts. So that is why all the meditation begins by trying to focus on that infinite reality with the help of whatever sadhana the Guru has given you, to try to see that reality within yourself. When it has been established, then we'll find that same reality all pervading in other beings as well. Then only true universal love and peace come. So that is why he says the definition of morality or ethics in Upanishads is attunement of the individual self to the self of the universe. So there is this important Mahavakya in the Upanishads, Tattvamasi. There are 4 Mahavakyas, Aham Brahmasmi, Tattvamasi. All mean the same thing, looked at from different standpoints. These are the 4 important Mahavakyas. Vakyas means sentences. Mahavakyas means great sentences, which give the gist of what spirituality is. So Aham Brahmasmi means I am Brahman. So that means you have to attune, remove all the imprisonment of the psychophysical self, remove all the coverings. As Sri Ramakrishna used to give a very simple example. He said, when you start peeling the onion, you remove one layer after another, and when you come to the core, nothing remains. Only the pure consciousness remains. That is what we mean by attunement of the individual self to the supreme self. A spiritual person is one who puts in great effort. Of course, it is not so easy. We again and again consider ourselves as helpless victims of Prakriti and then keep complaining, keep grumbling, grudging, with all the blame, putting the blame on others, the whole society for all our problems. We don't own up our own problems, that it is a result of our own karma. It is very easy to shift the blame on others. So, a spiritual person takes the whole responsibility and says, I have to undo what I did through several lives. I have been thinking wrongly, acting wrongly, and then I'm blaming. I can't blame others for my folly. It is I who have to undo. With Avidya Maya, I came to this situation. But on the other hand, this Vidya Maya will take us beyond this, beyond the impermanent things that you find in Prakriti, and you have to transcend it. So, Upanishads or the Vedanta says the highest possibility is that in which you explore or unify yourselves or attune yourselves to that individual self or that small ego which is there. You try to install the Lord in your own heart and consider Him to be the motive force. In the language of Bhakti, He is the Antaryami. There is a beautiful word, Antaryami. Sanskrit is such a beautiful language. Antaryami means one who controls us from inside. Antar means inside. Yami means one who controls. Now, what is our condition? We are controlled by outside. By the outside. Our outside forces, outside people, outside forces. Any Tom, Dick or Harry can come and disturb our mental balance. Because we are controlled from outside. We have lost that control. So here, Antaryami means one whose controller is within. That is the Lord. So if we place that Lord, establish Him in such a way that He will be the controller, then our chariot moves safely. There is no problem. Otherwise, if the horses are left free, if the charioteer also gives up the reins, then the horses will go helter and skelter and the vehicle will meet with an accident. So Antaryami means there should be an inner controller, and that inner controller should try to attune the lower self with the higher self. That is the goal of our life according to the Upanishad. So if there are 2 questions, I'll just quickly answer. What is the exact time to develop spiritual possibilities? Whenever you feel like, there is no time as such. You can't say that from 1 to 12 years, I will develop physical possibilities. From 12 to say 30, 40 years, you develop your intellectual. It's not like that. All the spiritual growth has to go together. That is why the childhood is the best time. In fact, all the spiritual knowledge that Nachiketa got was before the age of 14. He got the highest knowledge, where his father was still struggling with the grosser things. He wanted to go to heaven. He was doing all sorts of rituals in the name of religion. But it was Nachiketa. So there is no there's no time as such. It depends on what our past is. If a person has Shraddha like Nachiketa, that is the time. He felt this is the time. He argued with his father. He said, no, I want to know. You can't tempt me with all these things. I want to know the exact nature of the spirit. What happens if the body dies? What happens after death? Is there a spirit which survives the body? So there's no exact time. It all depends on how eager we are to experience those spiritual possibilities or develop those spiritual possibilities. Acha, one more question by Nikunj Mehta. Vedanta Upanishads, where can we follow from? Any authentic books? Oh, there are many books with lot of illustrations. There are many books. The translation of Upanishads by Swami Nikhilananda, for a person who has very little knowledge of Sanskrit, Nikhilananda's translations are very good. There are all the Upanishads. But those who know a little bit of Sanskrit, who can read Sanskrit, Swami Gambhiranandaji has written the entire series of. There are 10 major Upanishads. There are hundreds of Upanishads, but for all practical purposes, Shankaracharya has commented only on 10 principal Upanishads, or 11. If you consider Shvetashvatara Upanishad, which is considered to be one of the principal Upanishads. So there is a book known as 8 Principal Upanishads in 2 volumes, which cover the smaller Upanishads. Then there is Chandogya and Brihadaranyaka, 8 plus 2, 10, and Shvetashvatara. So altogether there are 11 very important Upanishads, but they all say the same thing. That is why we are taking these different verses from the different Isha Upanishad, which is the smallest, a very small Upanishad, only 20 verses. Brihadaranyaka is a very big, and Chandogya Upanishad, they are big, they have separate volumes. So you can get Swami Gambhiranandaji's translation, word by word meaning, plus the commentary, explanatory notes on that. That is also a good book. But the book that we are following, The Goal and the Way by Swami Satprakashananda, it was written for Western readers. I am referring to this book because he has taken the essence of all the Upanishads and discussed topic after topic. What do you mean? What is the physical body? What happens to the soul after death? How is a man reborn? Many wonderful chapters are there in the book. So for a beginner, I think The Goal and the Way, there is one more book he has written, Swami Satprakashananda. There's quite a few books he has published from our St. Louis Center. So you can get them on Amazon and read. Or if you want a very simple translation, then Nikhilanandaji's 8 Upanishads plus Chandogya and Brihadaranyaka is also there. They're published by our New York Vedanta Society. Okay, so I'll take your leave now. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat Shri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.